When we think about self-driving cars, it's easy to just see them as a simple upgrade, right? A new way to get from point A to point B. But that's like saying the internet was just a new way to send letters. This technology is about to kick off a massive chain reaction that's going to fundamentally reshape our jobs, our finances, and the very layout of our cities. So that's the big question we're really going to dig into here. What actually happens when cars no longer need drivers? And trust me, the answer goes way beyond just convenience. It reaches into every single corner of our urban economy. And the consequences, well, they could be both incredible and incredibly disruptive. And let's be super clear about one thing. This is not science fiction. This isn't some far off future we're talking about. The robotaxi revolution is already quietly rolling down the streets of major cities as we speak. I mean, companies like Waymo already have fleets of these things operating all across the US. They've gotten their footing in places like the Bay Area, and now they're even looking at expanding internationally to cities like London. This tech is scaling, and it is scaling fast. What's really fascinating is how quickly public opinion is flipping. When these cars first hit the streets of San Francisco in 2023, most residents were against them. But now, after seeing them in action, two-thirds are in favor. It really seems like seeing is believing. And a huge reason for that change of heart is safety. The data is showing that robotaxis are involved in 10 times fewer serious crashes than your average human driver. So this isn't just some cool novelty. These vehicles are actually proving to be a lot safer. But, safety is just one part of the story. The real engine for all this change, well, that's going to be economics. It's all driven by a massive drop in the price of just getting around. And this right here is the absolute heart of the robotaxi economic model. The most disruptive, game-changing feature is the one you can't even see, the empty driver's seat. Taking human labor out of the equation just changes everything. And this breaks it down perfectly. With a regular human-driven car, you're paying for the driver's wage, and on top of that, the car itself is just sitting there, parked and idle for most of the day. A robotaxi, though, it can be in almost constant use, spreading its costs out over tons and tons of rides. That efficiency is exactly why the price per trip is about to plummet. So this leads us to the first giant ripple effect, the potential end of owning a car, especially if you live in a city. Think about this. For the average American household, a staggering 15% of all their spending goes toward owning a car. That's car payments, insurance, gas, repairs, the whole shebang. It's a huge financial weight. So the promise here is incredibly tempting, a future where you can just call up a cheap ride anytime, anywhere, without all the cost and hassle of owning a car. It's basically transportation as a utility, like turning on a tap for water. But here's the massive paradox. If getting a ride becomes ridiculously cheap and easy, what's going to stop people from using them all the time for everything? The result could be a transportation utopia that accidentally creates an absolute gridlock nightmare. This really gets to a classic economic problem. When you get in your car, you don't personally feel the cost of the traffic jam you're helping to create. That cost gets spread out among everyone else who's stuck on the road with you. With super cheap robotaxis, this problem could just explode. So, what's the fix? Well, the most likely answer is probably some kind of congestion pricing, a robotax, if you will. It would charge more for rides during peak hours or in really busy areas. The idea is to nudge people to travel at off-peak times and hopefully make the roads flow better for everybody. Okay, so moving beyond traffic, this huge economic shift has a very real, very human cost. The impact on jobs is going to be one of the biggest and toughest changes our society will have to deal with. Just in the US alone, there are over 4 million people who work as taxi, bus, and truck drivers. We're talking about roughly 3% of the entire workforce, and all their jobs are directly in the path of this technology. And the fallout doesn't stop with drivers. Just think about the domino effect. Fewer accidents, that means less work for personal injury lawyers. If people stop owning cars, what happens to car dealers? And if a robotaxi can be outfitted with a bed for an overnight trip, it could start competing with short-haul flights and hotels. The ripple effects are just enormous. All right, let's zoom out one last time and look at the final and maybe the most visible change of all, the physical transformation of our cities. Just wrap your head around this number. In the average American city, a full quarter of the entire downtown area is just parking spots. That is an unbelievable amount of prime real estate that we dedicate to storing metal boxes that aren't being used. So what happens when all those cars don't need to be parked downtown anymore? All of that space gets unlocked. Huge parking lots could be new housing or parks. On-street parking spaces could be turned into wider sidewalks or bike lanes. It could make our cities way more livable and people-friendly. But of course, it's a trade-off. On one hand, you could get these amazing, dense, vibrant city centers, but on the other, if long commutes in a self-driving car are suddenly comfortable and you can get work done, it might encourage even more urban sprawl. It's basically a huge threat to public transit, potentially starting a death spiral where fewer riders lead to worse service, which leads to even fewer riders. Which brings us to, well, the road ahead. This isn't a simple technology you can just plug in and turn on. It forces us to face a whole new set of policy challenges that we've never really had to think about before. We're already seeing these weird new social things happening. Human drivers who know the robotaxis are programmed to be super cautious are actually bullying them on the road. Pedestrians might start to think they can just ignore traffic rules completely. And what about crime? I mean, a car with no driver seems like a pretty easy target for vandalism or theft. These are the kinds of complex problems we're going to have to solve. So let's end with this thought. A century ago, the car came along and completely remade our world, right? It gave us the suburbs we know today. Now, here we are at the start of another transformation that's just as profound. The risks are real for sure, but so is the promise. The big question we all have to answer now is what kind of city do we want to build this time?